Hey, good morning, everybody. How are you today? Hope you are doing well. Do I hear myself yet? Let's find out. Oh, yeah, I hear myself there. Sounds good. All right, let's get started. Welcome to another You Be the Behavior Consultant Monday mornings here in my time zone. Not sure what it is in your time zone, but we're back and we're going to talk about confirmation bias today, a hot topic pretty much in every industry, so why not in our industry, unfortunately. But we're gonna talk about that today. I found it really fun to read. Well, maybe not fun because it's not necessarily a fun topic, but an interesting topic to research in animal training. And I'm really looking forward to your contributions on this one. So I hope you've been thinking about it since you saw the announcement, because I really would love to hear your thoughts on this particular topic. But for the newbies, let's tell everybody what we're doing. This is You Be the Behavior Consultant. This is the live stream I try to do almost every Monday since 2020. And we do it at 11 a.m. Central Time, Mondays. How it works, I present a topic for discussion. I usually try to prompt you with some questions, and we get into it a little bit more, and then we recap it at the end. Okay, so, let's see. I can't see how many people we have on here just yet, but here is what we're talking about today. We are talking about confirmation bias. So, of course, that means we kind of have to define what that is. And, we don't necessarily have to just talk about animal training world to get started on our definitions of what that actually is. And then it would be kind of cool if people can think of examples, where you might have seen that, maybe some sort of general topics of that might have a little bit of confirmation bias going on in the animal training world. I thought of some that I think we might be seeing that in or have seen in the past. And maybe what are the implications for animal training? And then I think the really important things to talk about are what the kinds of things we can do to help address confirmation bias. And even if we see it in ourselves, that's really a good place to start too. So, so those are sort of my questions to get us started talking about it. And you are welcome to hop on there if you're feeling brave. I know it always takes a little bit of a leap to get in there and start putting your thoughts out there in our chat on this kind of a topic. And it's a big one, isn't it? And we're seeing it all over the world in all sorts of things. So feel free to hop on there if you feel like talking about confirmation bias. It's impacting everything we do these days, I think. Yeah, so what do you guys think? You feel like you see confirmation bias in animal training and anywhere that maybe, even if you feel, like maybe it's impacted something you've done or thought about, or something that, maybe it was your own animal training and you were like, oh, you know what, maybe I'm being influenced by confirmation bias, and maybe you had a little change of heart and went, oh, I think maybe something else is going on here and I need to change my thoughts and I need to, check myself. Because we can all be susceptible to it, by accident, not because we were, intentionally doing it. Okay, so Lindsay's got some definition stuff for us here. Confirmation bias is when people tend to search, note, or utilize information that agrees with their thoughts, beliefs, sometimes excluding information that goes against it. Yeah, that's a great definition. Very great. Fantastic definition. Yeah, it is. And, and I guess really probably what we should say is that confirmation bias is kind of a label for a class of behaviors, isn't it? And that's really what I think you're helping us with here, is that you're helping us define what those behaviors might be, that class of behaviors that would fall under that umbrella of confirmation bias. What do people do when they're demonstrating confirmation bias? So that's really helpful there. Thank you for that, Lindsay. Yeah, so that's what we might even want to explore in a little bit more detail. So, yeah, I like that. They tend to search, they tend to note, they utilize information that agrees with what they already believe. And I like the other part too about excluding information that goes against it. I think that's a really important one, that exclusion. In the animal training world, is a really fun question. Still thinking about what that might look like or topics where it occurs. I have to admit, when I was putting this together, I had to think about some things for a while to come up with some examples. But as I started thinking about, once I got one, I started going, oh yeah, there's another one, and there's another one, and there's another one. I think if you start thinking maybe of some big ones, or some big, like maybe some big things, or maybe big myths that and that maybe now you've already moved on past, you've already moved way past them, but in the past they probably were a big deal at one point, and everybody embraced them, and now you've kind of went, oh no, I don't think that way anymore. I would say that might give you some ideas. That's kind of where I started. Yes, exactly. I'm thinking of concepts like alpha dominance with dogs. Yep, that's exactly one that I had in my head that I put on my list here. I think that whole, sort of pack leader, be the pack leader. I think, if you think about it, that concept is still really kind of out there, right? For a lot of people, and a lot of people really feel strongly that you still need to be a pack leader with your dog. I think probably a lot of us that are in the animal training community, when we have conversations with lay people, a lot of people will still have that kind of communication with us, saying that, I tried to show him I was the boss. And, in fact, I think a friend of mine posted on Facebook a problem they were having with their dogs, and they were using that approach. And that's just because that's what's, been out there for a lot of people. I think for those of us who do animal training from a certain perspective, we feel really comfortable with the information that has evolved via, a lot of research, a lot of evidence that's come out that probably is not a valid approach anymore. But there's probably still confirmation bias for some folks that believe that pack leader type approach is the way to go, right? So that's a great one, I think. I think that's a good example, in my opinion. And so there's probably some more along those lines, if we think sort of, old mythology maybe that certain training communities might still hang on to. So yeah, I think that's a good example of that. And of course, I think we can think a lot about how that might impact animal training if you were to hang on to that pack leader approach, right, in terms of animal welfare. Right. And still does for some communities and for some animals. Yeah. So that's a good example. So maybe while you guys are thinking on that, I might give you a big, long, fancy definition that I'm gonna probably read. Sorry, guys. I know lots of words on slides is sort of a no-no, but I just wanted to be really as detailed as I could be. So this very much is in line with what Lindsay wrote for us. Confirmation bias is that tendency of people's minds. Well, I hate saying minds, but I kind of copied this. It's that, as Lindsay was saying, tendency to seek out information that supports the views they already hold. It also leads people to interpret evidence in a way that supports their pre-existing beliefs, expectations, or hypotheses. People easily accept new information that is consistent with their beliefs, but are skeptical of information that contradicts their beliefs. In other words, the confirmation bias can create self-fulfilling prophecies. They may focus on evidence that supports their theories while they undervalue evidence that supports an equally plausible alternative view. And of course, problems with this, scientists can commit to a theory and tend to disregard inconsistent facts, concluding that the facts are wrong, not the theory. So the confirmation bias can easily lead us to reach inaccurate and even unethical conclusions. It's essential to recognize our vulnerability to confirmation bias and actively guard against it by being open to evidence that's not consistent with our beliefs and theories, right? Okay. Oh, and we have we have Adrian. We haven't seen you in a while. Adrian, happy to have you back here with us. And Anne's here. Yay. Okay. I'll go back here. And Sheila says, based on your definition, I see this in many animal bird groups on social media. Yeah. So, and I'm kind of glad you said that, Sheila, because I think, one of the things with confirmation bias is it's easy to kind of point the finger at maybe politics right now. Oh, I hate to even bring it up. But as I started looking at the definition and digging a little deeper, and as Lindsay was saying, at first it seemed kind of hard to think of examples. And then as I started thinking back on the myths and mythologies that we've sort of dispelled over the years in animal training, I started coming up with more and more. And I was like, oh, maybe it isn't so rare in animal training. Maybe it's a little more common than I once thought. So that's why I started thinking, well, maybe this is a good topic for our community to discuss. Yeah. So to kind of tag on to that definition, and again, I'm sorry, there's a lot of words on all these slides here, but I started feeling like this was such a good topic. We talked a little bit with the dog example about how it can, Sheila likes the topic. Okay. How it can be dangerous for animal welfare potentially, especially when we were talking about the pack leader stuff. And I don't really have to, I'm sure, get into the details in terms of how that might impact welfare. But I think based on what you were saying, Sheila, about how many groups on social media are impacted, there's some other dangers that we might not think about. But these came up in all my research that I thought were really compelling. That, especially because we're talking about group behavior and how human behavior can be controlled. And so one of the things that can happen is that people can use confirmation bias, these behaviors, to manage the behavior of people that they're contacting. Oh, thank you, Adrian. You gave me another one of my examples of dominance in parrots. Don't let them be higher than your head is a biggie. Yes, that's another one that's on my list. You guys are good. Height dominance was definitely one of those, I think, that had a lot of confirmation bias going on there until we got better information, right? And that's one of the things about a lot of these I don't know if the right word would be theory or concepts or whatever. But yeah, when we get more information, we change our position, hopefully, and we move away from that confirmation bias. And that should be a nice thing that we practice, right? I have more information, so now I'm going to change my view or my position. And hopefully we're practicing that. And so you guys both picked two examples that I have on one of my slides, which is the height dominance and that pack leader stuff. So good job on you there. So yeah, so I think one of the things we see and everything we don't like our birds doing is hormonal. My least favorite word. Oh, I didn't put that one in there, but thank you. But I love that you guys are coming up with examples now. So I think, one of the things we can see with social media is that this influence of people influencing other people's behavior. So, and especially if somebody is viewed as sort of, maybe a leader or a thought leader. So those people that have sort of power or leadership or the ability to influence people. So, and right now we are in the age of influencers, right? Ooh, my gosh. So they can potentially cause great harm or good. I don't want to say that it's all bad, depending on their objectives. And the problem with confirmation bias, as we've already seen, it can blind individuals to the truth of things. So let's say somebody's pushing that height dominance thing again. And unfortunately, if somebody's really, got their heels dug in on that, or pack leaders again, they may, and maybe, again, it's just confirmation bias. They may truly, truly believe in it, but they're putting the blinders on to the evidence. And then what happens is they may not anticipate the consequence of their actions. And so maybe a lot of dogs end up getting, kicked in the belly because of that. And a lot of other people are kicking dogs in the belly because they're following that model. So when large proportions of the population embrace an idea or course of action, regardless of the truth, it can also bind all these people together. And all these people, become, so there's this social validity, right? And all these people start reinforcing each other, and it all becomes sort of, hey, we're all part of this group, and they all push that agenda. And it can also become dangerous to an individual and a social structure if the belief is greatly inaccurate and carries significant adverse consequences if acted upon, like we just said. When confirmation bias dominates a society with those holding the most power, conflict and worse can arise. So this kind of leads into the whole political stuff, where we've seen civilizations and mass annihilations have risen and fell with confirmation bias throughout history. And as I just mentioned, confirmation bias can be reinforcing to a group of people because it's socially reinforcing. And so, we do have this, in the whole training community, we have our little tribes that all, kind of follow certain training philosophies, in all different areas, they have their own lingo and things like that. And that can reinforce, unify these people. And it also can unify them against opposing agendas, right? So that can be a problem. And it tells you to turn off, punishes your critical thinking skills, and reinforces via social acceptance this groupthink mentality. And you believe statements to be true because everyone else does. Otherwise, you're going to lose your community. So we got negative punishment going on there. And it can affect many areas, like we've already said. So politics, medicine, financial investment, scientific research, and as we're finding out, animal training. And the idea that owls are dumb. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and I think that whole thing about, intelligence, right? Intelligence is a construct. Owls do things that I can't do. So there's a lot of that stuff that is tough to measure. So again, sort of operationalizing this behavior, people they favor, they interpret, they recall, and they cherry pick information that confirms, supports their pre-existing beliefs, and avoid information that contradicts them. So again, well, why would they do that? Because it results in desired outcomes. They gain appetitives, so it might be validation. They might get that social reinforcer. It might result in financial gain, in more control over more people. You might get more attention. You might get celebrated more, and it avoids aversives. You're not wrong. You can escape and avoid being wrong. One's views are validated and shared. This may result in higher profile, influence, financial gains, and like I said, being wrong is escaped and avoided. So those are some important things. And again, you guys keep coming up with some examples for me here. So what might that look like in animal training and other communities? So I think a really important one is this cherry picking and referencing and quoting of maybe specific scientific studies, but failing to illuminate other studies with contradictory evidence. And I think that's a really easy one to fall into. And what's so interesting is this morning, I don't know if you guys know this book, Beyond Freedom and Dignity. So it's a really good book that really explains how the environment controls our behavior. And you guys probably know that choice and control is such a hot topic right now in the animal world. And, there's a lot of discussions going on about that. And there's a lot of different vocabulary being used about it and different explanations being offered. And granted, this book is, I think it was in the 70s it came out. Was when it first came out. I'll have to look. Yeah, 71. So, certainly things have evolved and there's new information, but there's a lot of it that still really stands the test of time. was recently posted in the Constructional Approach to Animal Welfare and Training. Somebody posted an audio version of it, and I was just re-listening to it this morning, in fact. And there was a quote in there that I thought was really interesting, where, and this is by Skinner, by the way, just in case anybody didn't know. And there was a quote in there where Skinner actually says positive reinforcement is good and negative reinforcement is bad. And I was thinking, oh, that is so ripe for cherry picking. Somebody could totally cherry pick that out there and just say, well, Skinner said it. Positive reinforcement is good and negative reinforcement is bad. But if you listen to the whole paragraph, that's not the point he's making. What he's trying to talk about is reinforcement and how you basically, that you need to evaluate something as reinforcing, and that what we really look at is how the animal responds to something. I want to join your book club. Well, you're in my membership program. I'm going to put a link to the audio thing in the chat, in the community, so you can listen to it yourself. But what he's really talking about, he even says, he goes, it's not about the feeling, it's not about the emotional response. He said, and just like Joe Lang talked about in his article about emotions as contingency predictors, it's Skinner's saying the same thing, is that your emotional behavior is just telling you about the contingency. And so, because he even talks about, like, the kid might pick a red candy and ignore the green candy. It doesn't mean that, green candy is bad and red candy is good. It just means that the red candy, the reinforcing value was more significant than the green candy, but it doesn't mean that it's bad. That's how we measure by the response, right? We measure by the response. So, and that's what the point that he was trying to make, is that the only way that we'll know is by the animal's response. And so he wasn't saying that it was, even though there's a sentence there that says good and bad, he's saying you can't tell by the internal feeling, you have to tell by the response. And so that's what the whole paragraph is really saying. But I could totally see where somebody could cherry pick out that sentence and just say, there you go, Skinner said it. There it is, black and white. So I think cherry picking is a big problem. And I'm going to reference that again a little bit later when we go on to another slide here, but I'll save that for another comment. So you guys will have to tell me if some of this stuff speaks to you. Feel free to comment. There might be a campaign or a marketing type approach to procedures or programs as scientific or evidence-based. But I've had this conversation with other people. But what does science-based mean? Everything is science-based. Let's see. I heard during my consultations with a client to assist with noise level, I was told to cover the bird's cage to reduce vocalization, and it works. So why should I redirect vocalization? Oh, yeah, that's a tough one, isn't it? It works. Or, oh, here's another one. They do it in the wild. Yeah, I often hear that one. They do it in the wild. So birds do it to each other in the wild. So why can't I use that strategy? That's another one. So that comes back to that, the science-based stuff, as somebody once told me, everything is science-based, right? Everything, you can find a scientific explanation for everything. But I think, one of the things that was frustrating for me was, and I won't go into too much details, but when somebody was saying something was science-based or evidence-based, what they were explaining, or what it was one of those, like, they were omitting something. They weren't quite explaining what was science-based. They were trying to say an overall program was evidence-based, but what was actually evidence-based was like an element within that. And so their program wasn't actually empirically tested. It was just that within their program, in the history of behavior analysis, parts of it, people had tested parts of it, and they were kind of using that to say that it was evidence-based. It's hard to explain. Adrian says, there's an article that has been making the rounds online that people claim says that breed doesn't influence dog behavior. Kind of saying that the phylogeny of the animal doesn't matter. unfortunately, that's not what the article really says, or the conclusions from the very small sample size. Okay. So they're kind of saying that, a dog is a dog is a dog, regardless of genetics. Okay. In the equine world, we need to be the leader, sort of like the alpha male concept in the dog world. Okay. So there, that view is still out there, is what you're saying. Yeah. I'm sure. Yeah. The horse world is still evolving on a lot of things, isn't it? In terms of, how they view behavior. So there's definitely still some examples going on there. Yep. Okay. I think we also have this challenge with ethics being used as to add social pressure to some of the procedures and programs, so we'll get that word thrown in there a lot. Science-based for behavioral science means something different to evidence in the hard science. Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yep. So evidence-based versus science-based. Yeah, I have a really good book about, and I'm going to make a note. I actually have a really good book about what is evidence-based versus science-based, and evidence-based practices. I'll put that reference in the for the recording of this. What is evidence-based practice? I'll put that in there for you guys. Let's see what else. Taking shortcuts to information by accepting info from thought leaders as vetted social proof without doing the research. And this one's a tough one because, it's not that thought leaders aren't trying to do the right thing necessarily, but, because you have to, I think this is the tough thing with, social media influencers, because, we've got sort of, a mix out there, right? We've got some that are taking advantage of this new craze on the internet that, I can just put a bunch of stuff out there and, I'll get followers and I can make a living off the internet. And there is a whole, whole thing out there where you can sort of follow the formula to become a internet influencer or social media influencer and make a living. That exists. So if you want to go learn how to do that, you can go pay people to teach you how to do that. And you don't have to be an expert at anything. And basically all you do is collect information and give people information, and you basically become the vehicle to provide this information to people. And they'll tell you, you don't even need to be an expert. Just go find a niche market and be the vehicle for that information. So what happens is people view you as that vehicle, the vetted resource, and they count on you to be the one that is providing accurate information. But you don't know, so it's a little scary. So the challenge is those folks may be taking that information and manipulating it, twisting it in order to, suit their needs. Whereas somebody else may be genuinely just trying to provide, the best information they possibly can. You just don't know. So and people use that as social proof, basically, especially if there's a lot of people following that person. They may say, well, popularity is social proof. You just have to be really careful with stuff like that. So you kind of have to do your homework. Groupthink is when a group values cohesiveness and unanimity. Well, that cohesiveness. I can't say that word, more than making the right decision. So individuals may even self-censor criticism of the group decision, or group leaders may suppress dissenting information. So there may be positive punishment for going against what the group is, supporting. So you have to be aware of that if it's happening even within your own group. And of course, if you go against the group, you may be excluded. You may be ostracized if you're not utilizing the group's terminology, catchphrases, or questioning the dogma. You're the bad guy. You're the outsider. You're the renegade trainer. And of course, this, for some people, can lead to social and economic loss. So you can be positively punished for not conforming to that group think. So those are things that can happen. if you're not into that. Doesn't this all boil down to being able to critically think and taking the time to do so? Yes, very true. I agree. So that falls into our what to do category. You are definitely on track there for sure. And I can jump into that if you want to. Or we can get into some more examples. It's up to you guys where you want to go next. Because I do have, I think I have a couple more examples that we haven't mentioned yet in animal training. Although you did get some of my examples that I had on my list. So you were on track there. Yeah, maybe I'll go into examples and I'll let you guys keep thinking about what we can do. So I definitely had the height dominance in parrots that was mentioned because I think that was just, it didn't have clarity. People didn't have information, right? So as we gained more information and more people came into that community and shared more information, that clarity seemed to help. And we've got some more people arriving here. We're coming up with examples of possible confirmation bias in the animal training community. So I think as we added more clarity to the discussion on height dominance in parrots, I think more and more people have changed their views on height dominance. Those of you that are more in that community, maybe on social media or dealing with people directly, maybe you have more information as to what the perspective is now. I feel like it's changed more, but you know, maybe there's still some people hanging on to that perspective. The dominance theories in dogs, be the pack leader, it does still seem to persist, but I think that probably has to do with the television shows, right? Because that was really heavily mass marketed via TV, despite the fact that we have, you know, very important professional organizations that have put out position statements that say, you know, we don't support this. And Sheila says on the height dominance, it's probably still out there because it's in some books. So those books kind of keep that going for people who still access those books. Yeah. So once it's out there, it's still kind of out there, huh? Yeah. And I think the pack leader thing is still out there despite quite a large percentage of the professional community not supporting it. But you might, well, you know, I'm not as heavily involved in the dog community. Some of you may be more so. And I think that, and, you know, talk about confirmation bias, you know, the dog community that I'm involved with is not in support of that pack leader mentality. So again, if I was in a community that was more supportive of that, I maybe have bias towards that. But, yeah, so I would say that the population that, you know, because that was so heavily marketed via TV, I think there is quite a bit of people that are still on that. Oh, and Lindsay says there are still newer TV shows coming out that displayed balanced or traditional training and pack leader mentality. Okay. Yeah. And okay, again, talk about confirmation bias, right? So I tend not to gravitate towards those TV shows. And dominance is a believable narrative that dripped through unchallenged for nearly 40 years in the dog world. Okay. So yeah, so it's got a long history. So that also helps keep that conversation going. Will take time to change that unconscious acceptance. Okay, since it says BH, I keep feeling like I'm commenting on my own stream here. I'm talking back to myself. And then I think people want the instant fix and don't see further down the road. Yeah. Well, and you know, it's interesting because those of us, you know, I know we have a lot of people here that you know, work with a lot of different strategies. Yeah, I mean, you know, like you see here, I have, you know, discussion about brain waves. Must be. Yeah, you know, I have the discussions about negative reinforcement procedures here because, as you guys know, I've been working a lot with, like, if an animal is showing a fear response or aggressive response to an aversive stimulus that it wants to go away. So not contrived. We're talking about something that's already existing in the environment that it would like to have distance from. So this is like using, constructional aggression treatment. That has been a new procedure for me that I have learned about in the last few years that's been very successful in a way that I think is non-coercive, which is very different than, using, an aversive, like in a positive punishment, that's contrived and, like we're talking about in this dominance theory stuff. So I think for me, I lost my train of thought here. I think, yeah, so using negative reinforcement, like in a constructional aggression treatment, can be a very fast procedure, just like, positive reinforcement can be very fast too. So I think, and where I was going is I think that, it looks slow because the way we apply it in a procedure is very calm and, kind of sedate and sensitive to the animal's body language, and it's little tiny steps. But I often get transformation in one training session. So the application looks slow, but the transformation is actually, usually in one training session. So but I think as you guys have probably experienced, it's sometimes really challenging to help people get that visual and see that it can happen that fast until it happens in front of their eyes. But why I have the discussions about negative reinforcement procedures here is because this is one of these discussion areas right now that I think is challenging for a lot of people. I think there is discussions going on right now that seem to be very I think there's confirmation bias that's happening there, that people just hear the words negative reinforcement and they automatically assume it's something extremely coercive. But as we've talked about in other live streams, that procedures can look vastly different depending on how they're applied. And, and I know those of you that are members, if you go watch the constructional approach presentations that I have in the program, you'll see the video clips and some of these live streams that we've got examples where it's just giving the animal the reinforcer it wants, which is distance. And so I think this is one of those areas where a lot more discussions I hope will be happening in the future, so we can get some more clarity. And as I was mentioning before, the discussions about choice and control, I think, and this is where I think it'd be really good if you haven't, to go back and read this book, because that's really kind of the primer, as they say, on control, especially, well, and choice. It'll give you that starting point about, this is how this stuff works. The environment selects behavior. And I think like one of the conversations that I keep hearing or it keeps coming up that I keep going back to in my head is like where I think there's some confirmation bias is like there's a conversation like I keep seeing it popping up on social media where people are answering questions saying control is a primary reinforcer. And I think, well, under certain conditions, control can be reinforcing for the organism, but there's also times where we don't want control of that situation. Like I was thinking about, well, you know what, if the plane, I don't want to fly the plane. I want the pilot to fly the plane. If there's a brain surgery going on, I want the brain surgeon to do the plane. If I'm in Indonesian traffic, if I'm in Jakarta, I don't want to drive the car. I want that guy to drive the car. And there's times where it's like, my business is so overwhelming, I wish I had somebody else to run the business. I think, you can certainly find a research article that will show you that there's, in that particular study, the organism chose, and that the behavior of controlling was selected by the animal, or the human. But you can find plenty of other situations in which that wouldn't be selected. So I think we have to be really careful when we're repeating things that we hear. And so, I'm seeing people posting on these answers to other people in social media where they're just spewing out, control is a primary reinforcer. And I'm like, back up a little bit. Let's pedal backwards here. That's, a big statement to make. I'd be more comfortable to say that control is reinforcing under certain conditions, and under other conditions, it's not reinforcing, so like I would be screaming in terror if the plane was going down and I was being told you have to land that airplane. I'd be, that's not reinforcing at all. I want to escape and avoid that. That is not a situation where I want to be in control. So I think you really have to be careful about these things. And there's other things about these discussions about choice and control that we've, are still not speaking the same language. And so it's becoming this very sort of black and white argument, but I think there's a lot more to it that involves having more communities and perspectives, having more discussions and conversations so that there's perhaps a little less confirmation bias and sharing of more information so that we're maybe moving forward instead of being stuck. And I think that's what's kind of maybe going on in those choice and control conversations, unfortunately. So and the reason we don't want to be stuck is because of animal welfare. And Chris says, love those examples about control. Makes it very clear for me. And Sheila B says, I would love that. Yeah, I would love that too. I mean, because for me, I don't know about you guys, but I think it's really fascinating. I think the fun thing about these conversations is well, maybe this is what's reinforcing for me. I don't know about you guys. I get excited about learning these cool things. It's almost like you don't want to get the absolute answer because then the learning ends. It's like, oh, well, okay, now we know that. It's kind of like you want to go, oh, there's more. So, we've talked about before how, kind of the cool things we've been learning from the whole, Israel gold diamond legacy there about the degrees of freedom and if it's really true choice when the animal has more than one avenue to get the same reinforcing consequences, then there's true choice. I mean, I think to me that was really eye-opening, especially as an animal trainer who has for so many years kind of been taught, well, choice is when the animal can either come to you or walk away. I mean, but learning that really is that's 0 degrees of freedom. The animal has only one way to get that reinforcing consequence. I mean, that was really a big, that was a mind-blowing moment for me. And after having been in animal training for so many years, that really opened up a whole new world. And so I love having that kind of stuff. I love those moments when you're like, whoa, there's more to think about here. And there's ways that I could make this an even more exciting, and valuable experience for my animal, fun experience for my animal. And then you start thinking about and Anne says, exactly. I like things that make me go, yeah. And I want to keep doing that. I don't want it to stop and just go, okay, that's all there is to learn. And I'm just going to teach you those same things over and over again. I want to keep going. Whoa, that's pretty cool. So, so I'm excited for us to continue those discussions and see where they go. So yes. All right. So I keep talking here. So, you guys need to keep sharing some more examples here. All right. So I think maybe I will get into what to do. Again, I have lots of words on slides, people. I'm so sorry. But look at all those tiny words. So I think these were some cool things that I found. So one is we have to be aware that our own behavior might be influenced by confirmation bias. And I'm certainly aware that this has happened to me. Like I was saying, when we were talking about, the dog training communities that, I'm not watching those TV shows and I'm not hanging out with those folks. So, it's good to have somebody remind me that I'm not with those people. So I don't know how strong those communities are right now and how many people are still, hearing that information. And that reminded me, like, one of the things that I was listening to was telling me how, people tend to gravitate towards people that might be similar to them. And so they're like inclined to maybe be more receptive to information that is coming from somebody that has something in common with them. And so, we talk about, like, I do have a little picture of, our pack leader friend here on here. And, his story, I think, was very relatable for some people. And that, that helped, bring people into the fold that, could relate to him. And that could be, part of why some people were very, intrigued and wanted to, hop onto that story and accept that story and go, okay, I'm going to use this information. So, those are some of the things that can make it more likely that information that may not be, necessarily accurate might get absorbed. So anyway, so we do want to be aware that we may be influenced by confirmation bias. So that's our first thing. And you might want to identify situations when you're likely to experience that bias and what your triggers are that might lead you to being unreceptive. Like maybe you're watching this and you're sitting there going, I don't know the things she says, or maybe you just feel like I don't have anything in common with that person, so I'm just immediately going to be, I'm closed off. And I've done that before. I mean, I've watched a presentation and immediately, kind of sat back and been critical, but then I let myself think about it kind of independently after I've watched it, and then started, letting my guard down and going, wow, that was cool. There were some cool things in there. I need to think about that. And so you just have to, tell yourself, are you immediately being defensive for some reason? Is there something about that person you don't like that you're letting yourself, they're different from you? What is it that's making you put up the walls, so that you're being unreceptive, and make it so that your goal is to find the right answer rather than defend an existing belief. And I think another thing that we have to be careful about, and this is what Chris was saying, just because it was written or published or even published doesn't mean it's right. And this is where we have to practice those critical thinking skills. And I in the last few years, I've read a lot of journal articles, and I think I'm a little better now with my critical thinking skills. And I learned this, you guys remember Dr. Parveen Farhudi, who did some really nice presentations for us in the Global Online Animal Training Summit. She was really helpful in helping me really remember to look at those studies and look at them as an animal trainer and really read the methods. We have a tendency to just go to the discussion and the results, but as an animal trainer, we have a lot of us have a little different insight into how behavior is acquired, right? How behavior is selected. And so sometimes when you read the methods sections as an animal trainer, you're going to notice some things that maybe might stand out to you, and you'll go, and you might find a few flaws in some of these studies. Yeah, and Adrian writes, preconceived notions and improved scientific literacy to be more critical. Yeah, for sure. So, because, sometimes, I mean, there are definitely labs where they have people that know about training that really help create really good research projects. But there are some facilities where, they may not have, quite that skill set down, and it could impact, the results that they're getting. So, just take a look at the methods sections too. Don't skip over those. They can give you some really good insights that may, change what your your thoughts on that particular study. So, you definitely want to read critically and don't just go, well, it was published, therefore it's accurate. I've been asked to review papers before they were published, and there's times when I went, no, you can't say that. That's not right. You can't make that interpretation about behavior. So, just because it's published doesn't mean it's correct. So really practice your critical thinking skills. And again, to address cherry picking, bring omitted information into consideration. I know that's tough because there's a lot of stuff out there to look for. But you can try to do your own go to Google Scholar and start looking for what other things are out there on that topic, and try to bring into the discussion the stuff with that was omitted, and show how taking into account how that might change the situation at hand. And it is good to question information, even if it comes from a trusted resource, because everyone is vulnerable to confirmation bias. And I say, I wanted to write avoid the single guru trap, not just, guru trap, but it's really helpful to expand your sources of information. I think we have a tendency to kind of only follow one person's information, but I think it's good to have lots of resources and, compare and contrast that information. And even if, you don't even want gurus that are just coming from the same pool. I love listening to lots of different resources. And then even within that, I have to kind of weed out some stuff, here and there. Cause some of the resources that I listen to, I know that they're coming from a certain perspective that doesn't mesh with this perspective. And so I kind of have to take a little bit of this and a little bit of that and kind of say, okay, well, this part is not really behavior analytic. And I know that they don't understand that particular science. And so, you have to, that's where, again, your critical thinking skills have to come into place. Or you have to translate it into that. Like the thing, that I was talking about with the thought leaders that could be manipulators or influencers. That was all behavior analytic, but the guy was just using plain language. He was a guy that was talking about persuasion was his thing. His whole thing was about how to persuade people, but basically he was talking about non-contingent reinforcers, using shaping with approximations. Everything he was doing was behavior analytic, but he just didn't use the same language. Let's see. If the practices and philosophies of your source haven't evolved, I think that is a good red flag. If somebody's teaching the same thing they taught 20 years ago and haven't changed with new information, that should be something that might say, hey, maybe there's something going on here. If you're in a discussion with somebody, you can minimize the issues associated with being wrong by avoiding, I told you so's and, hey, I was right, you were wrong kind of stuff. And you can also give yourself a moment to pause and analyze data and resources before responding and commenting, and avoiding that knee-jerk emotional response. And again, you're collecting that information to evaluate the entire scope of the discussion before contributing. And I think the biggest one is being comfortable saying, I don't know, I need more information. And that's, I don't know how old our group is here, but I don't know about you guys, but the older I got, the easier that got. I think the older I got, the more I found myself saying, I don't know, because it seems like the older we get, the more you start realizing, gosh, there's just too much information out there to know, and I don't know it all. So those were my thoughts. Do you guys have any more examples that we missed? Those were just some that came off the top of my head. And I don't know, so do you guys concur that we probably have some confirmation bias in our community that it would be helpful to be careful about? I did a lot of talking this time. I'm so sorry, guys. I just had so many slides with words on them. If not, I'll move into our recap, because look at that, we're already 5 minutes to 12. Well, if you come up with some, you just pop them in the chat there. But I think oh, there we go. Humans are the only source of enrichment. I know you've been in the professional field for a long time. Some of us that are new to the profession, I know you're probably getting to trying to collect the resources can be hard. So humans are the only source of enrichment is a bad one. Maybe animals that can't be trained, like goldfish. Yeah. And we proved them wrong. Well, Soraya also proved them wrong that fish can't be trained. She showed us her trained fish. Yeah. It'll be a fun one to think about after the fact as you start kind of digesting all this information, and we think about all the different things that people, maybe kind of are very wed to, and why they might be so wed to them, and how we respond. And even, for yourself, I mean, this definitely had me thinking about things that, maybe I was wed to in the past or have changed, and why I changed, and what things, what information that I learned over the years caused me to change my positions, and how you change your position. So it does really make you think. Yeah. So, all right. So I might recap a little bit here. Confirmation bias is the tendency, and I need to change out that word minds. I think it's because I borrowed it from a different resource, of people to seek out information that supports the views they already hold. Just like other behavior, it is maintained by desired outcomes, gaining appetitives, avoiding aversives. Animal training is just as vulnerable to the problem as other industries. We likely have already seen this impact our views on a variety of topics, and it is still having influence. It is important to recognize, because ultimately this reluctance to adjust our position based on facts can impact animal welfare. We discussed a number of strategies to implement to help keep the focus on doing what is right instead of being right. And let's see. Lynn Court says your identity is wed to a particular theory. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think this kind of goes with the sometimes with the how should I put it? Sometimes the business of animal training, that sometimes we have people get their business tied, or their business identity tied with, particular views. And so that makes it hard to change when it's tied up with your business. Yeah. So that can be tough. I get it. Yep. That makes me think of the book Rethink by Adam Grant. Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. And I'm glad that you mentioned that. I think because I believe, I think Hillary mentions him in her global online animal training series, How Wonderful I Was Wrong. I think she mentions him in there. Yeah. And so that I did want to mention that some of the stuff we talked about today, she mentions a little bit in her How Wonderful I Was Wrong, because that's the whole thing is, when we can embrace that, hey, I was wrong, and so now I can go on another track and progress. And then she goes into a whole bunch of examples of new directions that she's gone, kind of by embracing this whole idea that growth is great. So yeah, I think Adam Grant was one of the inspirations in there. And then I also wanted to mention that we did a podcast with Dr. Suzanne Hetz and Dr. Dan Estep on critical thinking skills. So that's another resource you may want to go check out that really ties in with what we talked about today. And that was an excellent presentation. Yeah, thanks, Anne. I think Hillary did a great job there. And again, for you folks that work with birds, you'll really like the examples in there. And then I also wanted to mention, we talked a little bit about the constructional approach to animal welfare and training. So that online virtual conference is coming up, July 25th through 30th. And I think it's posted now. I believe Sean and Masa posted a video clip that's on YouTube, or it's on social media right now, that gives you a little sneak preview. and they're offering a special discount to folks that is available now, and the early bird registration ends May 31st. And that's really a really fabulous presentation that's going to show you that really lovely non-coercive application of negative reinforcement for animals that want distance as a reinforcer, especially flighty herds of animals. So you'll definitely want to see that. Oh, and Lindsay's going to that. Oh, yes. And Sean and Masa are here, and they say, yes, the video is up on social media, so you'll want to check that out. And they have that special discount going right now, so better take advantage of that before that goes away. And if you happen to be in Boston, you can learn even more about the constructional approach to animal welfare, because we have something like 23 presentations at this conference. And so all about different aspects of the constructional approach and how it applies to it in a wide variety of situations. And so that is Monday the 20th. Well, my presentation, Sean, or Masa's presentation, that is going to be the 29th. But there's other presentations throughout the entire conference. So if you're in that area, come on, see us live. And because of that, there will be no live stream on next Monday and no Tower Talk on Tuesday. Sorry, guys. But we'll be all in person out there. So come hang out with us there. And again, if you're not a member, come be a member and come see all these cool things that we have in the program for you. And you can keep the learning going at your own leisure, at your own pace. All right. So there we go. Oh, and there I am in your face. All right. And Sean and Masa are saying we're looking forward to exploring the topics together at the conference. Yeah, there's some really cool presentations at that conference, at both conferences. So yeah, so I'm excited to see a bunch of people in person and virtual. And thank you again from Sheila. And I hope you guys had fun talking about this. And I'm sorry I won't see you virtually next week, but we'll see you the next time, right? And Lindsay says, thank you, Barbara. Another stimulating topic to think about. Well, yeah, I hope it gets you thinking. Should be stuff we should all be thinking about, I guess, huh? And yeah, and you guys should listen to that audio recording of this if you can. That'll get you thinking as well. Yes, thank you guys. All right, well, keep the learning going. Have fun with your critters, and I will look forward to seeing you all again very soon. All right, guys, take care. Bye.